So tonight we are honored and privileged to have Dr. Kathaleen Reid-Martinez, who has got a PhD in speech communication. Welcome, Dr. Kathaleen.
Thank you so much. I am delighted to be joining you. I too have enjoyed the series. As you all know, this is early morning for me, and often I'm on my way to the office and in meetings by now at the office. But I am delighted to spend the time with you. And by the way, I have enjoyed the opportunity to review many of the materials through the video recordings. Thank you. It's a great blessing, not only to those who are able to be present each week, but for those of us who have to do it at a different hour of the day. So thank you for making that available. I am delighted to talk with you. The main area in the slide that I want to go toward is the transformative adaptive leadership. And what we find in turbulent times like those we've had in the last decade, but especially in this last year, is that indeed we have to look at different aspects of the leadership development. And so we're bringing together the concepts of transformative and adaptive leadership. We also going to just take a moment. Mr. Wee did just introduce me, but I did want to say Oral Roberts University greets you. We'd like to all say hello from our wonderful student population. They are great. We have them back on campus this fall. We're very excited. For those of you who don't know where Oral Roberts University is located, we are in what you call the heartland of the United States, right in the middle. So this is a bird's eye view of our campus, and you can see in the small inset map, we are in Oklahoma, and then we're in the northeast corner of a quadrant of Oklahoma. So we're right in the middle of the country. So it's interesting because we get to watch the West Coast and the East Coast, and we stay right there in the middle observing. And moving on, Mr. Wee mentioned that leadership has been a large part of my life for quite some time. Everything from the Geneva Institute that he referenced to the work that I've done with the United Nations, as well as with the Partnership for Peace Consortium and NATO. In fact, this week at NATO, we were just talking about how do you do online learning for leadership development and security institutions around the region. So there's a lot that's going on that's still being challenged, and I'm grateful to be able to be a Christian voice representing Christian values in that particular context. So I serve as senior advisor on a number of different topics to those areas. But I thought it would be a good idea for us to take just a moment and to think through kind of the case study of our own lives about the leadership and what happened to us during COVID-19. And I'm going to talk for just a couple of minutes here, or a few minutes here, about ORU's response to the COVID-19, especially at my level. As was mentioned, I'm Chief Academic Officer. I'm also second in command. So if something happens to the president, I have to step in and fill in that role until the Board of Trustees would assign a new person. But what that means for me is that I'm having to constantly observe the university from above and observe the university from below, if you will. So I have that interesting perspective that I'm working at one position, but I have to keep an eye on what's happening at another level. So I want you, as I go through this, to think through what are the things that you were doing, because when I finish, I want us to take a couple of minutes and not worry so much about ORU, but let that trigger your imagination and memory over the things that you did or that you would like to do differently. So let's just take a quick look. In adaptive leadership, we have a lot of pieces that we understand requires mobilizing people in different directions when we hit a crisis. And in about 10 days, we had to actually launch a mass mobilization to communicate, to train, and instruct our community at ORU into the virtual learning process. Now, just so you have an idea, that would be about, we have 170 full-time faculty. We have an additional 350 part-time faculty. We have over 4,000 students, and then our staff that's all connected to that. So we had to mobilize, as you did, almost overnight, into moving those people into a virtual environment. So this was the challenge that we faced. We were very fortunate that we had before us a lot of technologies that were available. So we had to mobilize students. We had to mobilize the faculty. We had to do things like return our ORU study abroad students who were around the globe. We had to get them home. We had to figure out how to house international students who were unable to return home. And the list goes on and on. Fortunately for us, we had in place two pieces of technology that were absolutely essential. And that had started when I came to the university about 6 years ago. I had said all faculty will be working within the online learning environment to house their course syllabus, to interact with students in terms of exchanging their papers. And in that environment is where they would place their grades. I didn't know if a crisis would happen, but rather in my mind, I thought for when a crisis will happen. I didn't know what it might be, how it might look, but I started the process 6 years ago of training faculty to operate in both a virtual and in a face-to-face environment. I even go one step further, by the way. Just in case the technology doesn't work, I make certain that all syllabi are on file and students are encouraged to remove and download their syllabi, able to work independently should they not be able to be in touch with the university for an extended period. 2 or 3 different levels that we put in place on that academic level. And we started that work when I got there 6 years ago. I don't have to tell you that a key part of this was that we had to make certain that we were communicating. And this is essential. When you look at that had to be driven, as you all know, from a leadership perspective. The next slide, please. The leadership has to take immediately a plan for communication. How's that going to work? With whom it's going to work? In what order is it going to work? Most of us have our daily operational communication that's often taken for granted. But in that crisis situation, we could not take the communication for granted. So we were very deliberate about the president's interaction with the Health and Safety Task Force and Committee, then when and how the president would regularly communicate certain information to the cabinet, and then how we as the cabinet would immediately distribute that to our department and units. Again, that was very, very intentional process. Some of the things that we were asking and had to deploy quickly is students going on spring break. Do we bring them back from spring break, or do we leave them at home with their parents? So those are the challenges, among other things, that we had to answer. And remember, at that point, no one actually knew how extensive the illnesses would be or what that would look like. Moving to the next slide, with regard for myself, the thing that I found that was essential was building on the relationship that I already had with my deans. And yet, in the midst of all this, I had to go another level of team building. I could not just take for granted that the work of the past was going to be adequate. I had to be very intentional, very focused in using all of those skill building techniques that we have for building your team, keeping your team, working with them closely together. But here's the main thing, is that I already had done the homework before the crisis hit. And core with that was over the 6 years of working with this team, I made certain that my values and who I was known to the deans and that I knew and understood their values. On top of that, we all chose to understand what is the university and what is its values. We all shared in the common belief that Christ, through the power of the Holy Spirit, would get us through day-to-day operations, but also through the crisis. They knew my character and my temperament. They knew the things that would cause me to react in a more, shall we say, provocative way of saying yes and no, and what would cause me to answer with that reflective moment in which let me think about it. They knew how to approach me, and I knew how to approach them because we understood how each of us would react. My expectations for their work ethic, we had already aligned that. They were in agreement with me, and I was in agreement with them. They knew how to commit to the shared vision and all of our common roles to get that done. So how do you work independently and how do you work together? And then while other universities were closing with COVID-19, the team that I was working with, they were fantastic. They said, no, together we can do this. Tell the president, we're with you. We'll make it happen. And that's what we were willing to do and helped us do. Underlying it all was the commitment that we wanted our students to succeed. And that was very telling because that kept us going through some of the darkest of times, trying to figure out how to handle some of the situations when students were so fearful and even our faculty were fearful. Moving on, you cannot over-communicate, which is the previous slide. I just wanted to point this out that, as I said, team building remained very important. And you cannot over-communicate in this type of situation. So I increased the time with meeting with my deans. We met every day. I called it the stand-up meeting, but sometimes that stand-up meeting went for over an hour as we resolved problems. We did not let a single issue go unresolved or being addressed. So whatever was brought to the table, we hammered it out. We stayed there at the table until we figured out a solution. We did that day after day after day after day. It was very tiring, but very rewarding to see the great results. We also provided weekly emails and videos to faculty. I spent a lot of time sitting in this chair making videos and sending them out. This was to encourage and inspire the faculty to express gratitude for the faculty's hard work and overcoming the challenges of teaching virtually and mentoring the students all through these difficult days. You can imagine the fear of the students and the faculty having to calm their own fears to deal with the concerns of the students. It was also highlighting the additional faculty training opportunities. In the middle of all this, again, we had to be committed to continuous training for the faculty. So not only were they engaging the students, but we were having to take them up another level, another level, another level. So they were learning and stretching as they were helping the students to stretch and learn. As you know, in an organization, that's no small feat, but they were fantastic. And then in the midst of all of that, I had to also have my hand on the outside world. What was happening at the federal level? What was happening at the state level? What was happening at the accreditation agencies? So we were having to engage with each of these. What's happening with the Center for Disease Control? Normally, I'm dealing with federal regulations and state regulations, but I found myself involved in what's happening on the CDC, the Center for Disease Control. We had to deal with them at the federal level, the state level, and the local level. At the local level, we were providing information and feedback to help them make decisions about how to interpret the policies in that local context related to education. So we were not only receiving information, but we had to be a part of providing the feedback to influence what's happening in those policies, as I said, especially at the local level. And then our information was fed all the way back up line with the challenges that we were facing with the federal regulations as well. By the way, for those of you who may not know, in the United States, a lot of the federal work that we do is connected to the federal student loan process, which determines how we report on our students who receive federal loans and federal grants in order to go to university. So it's a very big process. And of course, what was happening with international student visas, another big issue. As I was bringing students home and faculty home from international work that they were doing or study abroad, I was also having to interact with what were the policies of local country and the local policies of countries around the globe. So as you can see, we were working internally and we were working externally, and our external work went all the way around the globe during that time. Making certain that the students, for instance, in the UK could actually get on a plane and get home based on those policies. It was an interesting journey. One of our students had to go to about 3 or 4 different countries before they could get home. And we had to track that, monitor that, and get them here. back to the U.S. Moving on, this obviously required that we redeploy staff in order to keep a high interactive flow. One of the best things we did was we immediately converted our administrative team into not just people who were routinely processing paperwork and processing our operations and procedures, but they became the interactive points for our students. And they would interact to support the students and in turn support the faculty. All of this information at the end of the day was brought up line. What kinds of issues are the students facing? What kinds of issues are the faculty facing? That would come into the deans and myself. We would solve the problems and push that information back down within, like I said, less than a 24-hour period. Very exciting time. Employees were incredible. They all stepped up to the plate, did the job. All of them working from home, did a great job. By the way, I have to say kudos to our IT team, getting everybody fully operational in a 10-day period was fantastic. Moving forward, what kept us going was the key academic commitment. As I said, student success. That meant more to us than anything. A lot of universities moved to a pass-fail grading system. Yes, they were open. They didn't close for the semester, but basically they moved everything to pass-fail. If the students made it, okay. If they didn't make it, that's okay too. If they got to class, that was okay. If there was no class, that was okay too. They were just trying to keep the doors open and keep moving. But we wanted our students to have a full opportunity to gain that information, to gain the knowledge of their discipline that they should have received. And we wanted them to have a full value of their academic effort, not just some pass-fail stuck on a transcript somewhere for the semester. We did not want that to follow them the rest of their career. And so we actually gave them a workplace advantage by saying, no, you persevere with us, hang in there, we're going to get you through, and you're going to have that transcript, and you'll be one of the first in line because your transcript is strong and it's good, and you came through the COVID without problems. So that was an exciting time of encouraging the students. As I indicated, the rapid redeployment of faculty required also rapid training and development. We'd given them baseline training over the 6 years, but now we ramped it up. Lots of lessons learned. I won't go into the details, but we had to mobilize for that rapid training deployment. We had a great team for academic excellence who kicked in, and they were wonderful. We still have every recording of what was done. So if you could not attend at the time we were offering these training sessions, they were all recorded. They were all available. Faculty can still refer to them at any point. The university important feature I've referenced is the role of technology, which was the training of the faculty and the students. The next slide. And this was huge. We used a variety of technologies, including, by the way, artificial intelligence and virtual reality was a part of what we were doing as we were engaging chat boxes and other things to help move the students with comfort and understanding through the process. All that technology was essential, and it really made a difference at our institution. Again, our IT team was fantastic. Main thing, we kept our focus on the main things, and we measured all as we went. Every week, we were checking on the performance of students, on the performance of faculty. Every week, we adjusted our course to get appropriate training, changes in technology, whatever were needed to meet the needs. So how did we measure it? Student success, withdrawal patterns, grade point averages, and incomplete. So the student engagement, we actually have a score that we created that dealt with their performance in everything from chat rooms to engagement with the faculty in special sessions, their time in the classroom. And we also measured the faculty engagement with those students as well. So we had a full measurement process every day that we were reviewing for that. And so we were able to pick up quickly if students were not attending the virtual classes, if they were not turning in homework, we could find that out pretty quickly. As a result, our withdrawal rate looked like it would in any typical spring semester. Our grade point average, because of all of our focus, was actually slightly better. It was not statistically significantly better, but it was almost at that point. It was actually slightly higher. I put it down to constant focus. Our incomplete rates, the number of students who just withdrew from a course, said I can't do it, actually those were all within the norms and expectations. So that was very exciting to see that coming about so simply. And where that leads us is that in turbulent times, it does call for transformative leadership. So I want to just stop and take a moment and ask you to talk about what were those things from your perspective as you were going through leadership during your crisis with COVID-19? What did I talk about that resonated most with you? What did you do well, and what do you wish you'd done better? I can't hear anyone. Hello?
Yes.
I guess that this is Yehu here. I guess that in turbulent time like COVID-19, where many of us are locked down, it calls for a different form of communication. You know, the normal face-to-face communication is not possible, and we resort to technology. And many of us have to learn how to use technology like Zoom very rapidly. But thank God that you know, there are ample amount of YouTube teaching that's available that we could actually upgrade ourselves. And I think in such turbulent time, the important thing to get people to act together in unity and unison is communication. And with today's ability to communicate through the airways is crucial. But what is more difficult is for the older generation that may be left out because they may not be quick enough to learn the new way of communication. Right? And I think Singapore government is doing a good job in that respect in you know, encouraging the older folks by giving them supportive grants, encouraging them to work with their children or the grandchildren so that they could get up to speed.
That's a great public policy strategy. I know that we found that all of our faculty, and our average age of our faculty is older, as is the case throughout most of the United States. And we found that that extra training, that extra support, like you're saying, you need technology at home. If their technology wasn't working very well at home, we had our IT team that actually went out to a couple of faculty homes and fix the situation for them. You're absolutely right. That kind of support and encouragement was essential. But once engaged, they did become very strong and very good users, and many of them actually are very proficient with it. We did offer the opportunity for faculty who were not comfortable working from home for whatever reason. We offered them the opportunity to come into a particular building that we designated. By the way, in the United States, universities were considered essential business, so we were actually allowed, if we'd chosen, to stay open. We did not have classes on campus, but we did have one building that was super sanitized every hour on the hour, and faculty could go in there and actually teach in front of the cameras, even though there were no students in the classroom. But, you know, we had a lot of faculty sign up to do that in the first week. But after we completed the training, we got them engaged. They saw the level of support that we had. All of them except for 2 went home.
Kathaleen,
any other comments?
Are you aware of any other universities who put the time, effort, and leadership into caring for the students that ORU did?
There were other institutions that moved hard and moved fast. Some of them, as we were, had already begun movement in those directions. A couple of universities like Regent University is primarily or large part online anyway. If your child goes to Regent, they'll take some face-to-face classes, but they also take a lot of online courses. So that type of university was able to move quickly into just an online environment. I think what made us fairly unique was the Zoom capacity went so smoothly and easily because of the preparation that we had already done. As I talked with other administrators, many of them got there with a lot of fits and starts. I would say we got there quickly with our technology because we'd had that ingrained into the system for the 6 years I've been there. And in that process, then what we were able to move into was support for the emotional needs and spiritual needs as well as academic needs of the students. And I think that's one of the main differences is when I redeployed those staff to become those who were interactors with, they were a human being that was interacting and checking on those students, calling them. Every Wednesday, they would get a list of students who were not succeeding or who were struggling. And from every faculty member, we would get that list. And on Monday, all those assistants and staff would begin calling those students. And then when they couldn't handle it because we had some students that got very depressed and very frightened, we were able to hand that over to our student life and our counseling people who were on standby, ready to go. By the way, that's another. Those who are caring for the mental well-being of the students. Once you cross a state line, so when the student went home, instead of being in Oklahoma, all of a sudden we're dealing with the regulations of mental health care in a local state where the student is located versus being in Oklahoma. That was another hurdle. So the university had to move forward and get permissions. Finally, there were a lot of blanket statements by most of the states that allowed us and other universities for our mental health counselors to work within those states during COVID. So that's what I'm saying. It wasn't just a simple process to say, now let's counsel our student who may be suicidal because they're so depressed and they're so frightened. We can't just pick up the phone and say, let me be your counselor in the state of, let's say, New Jersey. And we had to actually get permissions from those local agencies in New Jersey for us to operate and function there. And fortunately, again, around the United States, team effort kept in place. The states began to all create policies. They were COVID-19 policies that gave us all a lot of freedom.
And how many people were in your team?
I'm sorry, what?
How many people were in your team in formulating the plan of action you have articulated tonight in caring for your students? I mean, you can't do it by yourself.
Yeah, correct. I have a team of 8 deans that were my core group. Of those 8 deans, 2 actually function as my, they're called extra support to the provost. And so they are basically associate type vice presidents, but that's not their title. We don't use those particular titles. So it was the 3 of us plus the other team members. So there would be an additional 6 people. That's the group that met every day solving every problem. But the concept of kind of going up and down line was from my work around 1999, in which we were all dealing with Y2K. So I pulled on a lot of the past experience. Even though that wasn't a crisis, we had in place a lot of things.
Yes, that's so good. And did you have low management, high accountability, or were you involved in micromanagement?
Where was I in that process?
Yes.
It had to work a little bit both ways. Basically, for instance, we talk about the faculty count. How are the faculty doing? That came into our Academy for Teaching Excellence with one of my right-hand people, Kim Boyd. She did a great job making certain that that came in, identifying faculty training needs, identifying faculty issues. We then immediately pushed, like if the faculty member were struggling for any reason, academically or emotionally, we pushed that to the dean. The dean then managed that situation. So we were more the hub where the information came in. Then we redeployed that back down to the dean. And the deans were absolutely the yeoman that made things happen.
Thank you.
So it comes in, goes right back out. But again, because I had that meeting each day with the deans, unless it were a personal issue that the dean needed to directly address with a faculty member, we looked at it. First of all, was it a system problem? If we heard a complaint or an issue with a faculty member, that was our first question. Is it really a personal issue or is it a system issue? And so that was how we would approach everything. First of all, let's see if there's a system change that needs to be made. And then the deans helped make that decision. And then we would deploy that system change. And usually that would take care of the problem. We had very few what I would actually call personal faculty situations that had to be dealt with. We did have a couple, like where a faculty member had a number of household illnesses, those types of things that we had to deal with. But those were few between, rare and few between. Almost everything we heard became a systems concern that we turned around, solved within 24 hours if possible. Okay, any other question? We'll move on. If not, so we live in this changing world, and I don't have to tell you that technology is a big part of it. We all have the internet. We all have our smartphones. By the way, a couple of faculty did run their classes using that smartphone. It was amazing. But, you know, it's easy for us to just think about that classroom if I'm a university professor, but you think about all the changes that we live with. More movies available, more television programs available, more news available. Or is it news, or as we would say over here, some fake stories? I don't know. But we've got more photos. We have more understanding of deep space. I mean, think about just the fact that we can now roam the face of Mars. The global economics are changing dramatically, and no one yet knows what's going to happen with the printing presses that have been running around the globe when it comes to currency. By the way, and what's going to happen to that cryptocurrency? Is it going to take over or fall again? Nobody knows yet. It's a new experiment. Globalization is waning. We're seeing nationalism rising. So what does it mean to be a global organization or to be moving globally, as in the church? And all of a sudden we find ourselves in a deglobalization environment as people move toward nationalism again. By the way, that's not new. When I was dean of the School of Government and Leadership back in the 90s and early 2000s, the prediction was that we would see the rise of tribalism and we would see the rise of nationalism. And we're right on time, just as all the predictions said. The electronic shopping, by the way, has boomed. I don't have to tell you that, especially during the pandemic. And the public policy changes have been quite difficult as we look at how it has disrupted our businesses, right? We've all felt it. The number of U.S. businesses that are going under because of the COVID-19 policies breaks my heart. The number of families that cannot get back to the university because the family no longer has their business is tragic. So COVID-19, just the tip of the iceberg with what's going on in terms of how we are reacting and what we need to do. I do want to make one comment, though, before we go any further. We talk about all the technology. We talk about the iPhones. Interestingly enough, while we know that the social media has been a major means of keeping us connected, like during COVID-19, it also has been a source at times of causing people to be highly disconnected and alone and lost because there's so many voices. So in leadership, a key component of that social media is consistent messaging in a way that creates a rhythm and a pattern to give continuity for our students and for our faculty. That was the key. Otherwise, they can get a lot of disparate messages and actually feel more alone. So I don't have to tell you many of those things and the impact that that had as we were going through there. Again, could you share any of the disruptions that you may have had as you went through the COVID-19? Any thoughts you want to bring to that?
Kathaleen,
back up. Yeah, good.
Kathaleen, one of the issues we're facing in Australia is major retrenchment of academic staff in our universities across our nation. Is that a trend or something that's happening in the US or throughout the world?
If you're discussing there how that they are, you're suggesting that they're not wanting to come back to the classroom?
No, what I'm suggesting is the academic staff, the researchers, the professors are being made redundant because students' levels have dropped considerably.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you for clarifying how you were using the word retrenchment. Yes, that is happening in different parts of the U.S. There's also, I was just reading the Chronicle Higher Education this week. Some of the professors are saying, oh, it's just partly the leadership taking advantage of the crisis in order to chop us out and get rid of us. The truth is that higher education has been in a crisis for a number of years. I think I have a slide on this a little bit later. We're not working in isolation when COVID-19 hit. Education is simply not affordable. And a lot of the federal and state institutions are no longer willing to put as much money as they once did into education. So that means that when the opportunity came with COVID-19, indeed, student population drops. And so we are seeing universities having to take drastic measures. We made a commitment at ORU that we did not want to lose a single person if we could help it. So what we did in April of this year, in May, we made the decision as an executive team that we would have everyone at the university, every single employee, faculty or staff, take a reduction in pay for the summer. So our staff all took a 10% reduction in pay. The dean level and myself, the dean level took a 15%. So that's your middle management, your upper middle management took a 15%. The executive level, we all took a 20% cut in pay. And we did that for about 3 or 4 months. And that was our commitment to not lose a single person. And that positioned us well to get through the summer. We were in the black through the summer, and we were able to start the fall with reserves. So that's how we managed it. Other institutions were not willing to take such a hard stance, so they have lost a number of people. One of our sister institutions lost something like 46 positions, faculty positions. That was a long answer. But yes, around the nation, there's two things. One is the universities cannot afford to keep the faculty. And secondly, some presidents are harnessing this moment to chop out some dead wood and change the university. Across the board, there's the angst that indeed academics is playing a lesser role to the business side. That's across the United States.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Taking a look at any other comments or back to the questions that we had there. Could we take a look at the questions? What else did you see in your ministry and in your business? Okay. There's no questions. We'll move on. Go ahead.
I do have a comment here. I believe that COVID-19 is something which ushered into the days of Acts, where the worship of Yahweh is in small group in the family setting. Today the big churches are affected because they cannot meet. The policy of churches that can only meet with 50 people. So mega churches with 20,000 or 30,000 people could not meet at all. And now they got to be dispersed into the respective homes. And I see this is something which the Lord ushered in because the effectiveness is in small group. A big group environment does not really enable intentional discipleship.
That's good. Yes, I think it does create this opportunity for some transformation. And, when I came home for COVID-19, I was in prayer and I just looked up and I could just see it so plainly. And the Lord was saying, look at what I'm carving. Don't look at the things of the world, but look at what I'm carving. Look at what I'm doing. And when we join with him and harness these opportunities for his glory, great and mighty things happen. We harness the moment to care for our students. And as a result, we continued that all summer long. Even as people got reduced pay and everything, we worked harder than we've ever worked before in the summers, this past summer. But as a result, we actually had more students at ORU at our census count just a few days ago than we've had. It's our highest number in the last 12 years. So God is faithful when we're faithful. Yeah.
I also want to add on that with COVID-19, it forces the leadership of the church to look into technology as a way of communication. In the past, we always wanted to go into core media, but we just don't have the impetus nor the driving force that pushes us into that direction. But with COVID-19, it really forces our leadership to look at how best we can harness technology to reach out to the masses.
Yeah, I agree. For me, when I first got to ORU, I was requiring all of these things, like every faculty member will be in D2L. Now, D2L, in case you don't know, it's the learning management system, and it's how you do online learning. Faculty did not want to do that, but they had to do it. I made them do it. Year one, I offered it. Year two, I said, you got to do it, and here's extra training. In year three, it's not an option. You will have it, or it's a performance issue. Well, in year six, when we're hitting the crisis, they're all going, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So I know what you mean. For me to bring this into the institution was at first like pushing rope. And we all know that, but in leadership, you've learned like I had, yeah, we keep pushing that rope, but at some point they need to understand I'm going to have them on the other end and I'm going to pull them into it, whether they want to or not. And that's literally what I did. In year one, I put certain things in place, year two, year three, year four. And my goal had been by the fourth year to be able to respond to a crisis. And that's what we did. But we still had a final pull on that rope for the crisis. It took the crisis to push 100% of the faculty to the level that they needed to be. And now this fall, they've started to blossom in this new environment. It's actually amazing to watch as they are teaching face-to-face classes, and they're teaching 200 plus students virtually. We have 200 students that did not want to be back on campus because of concern about the virus. And so we have in the classroom the face-to-face teaching going on, plus students in the virtual environment. If a student also has to be quarantined because of COVID, that if they test positive or they have been exposed to someone who is tested positive, the student has to be put in quarantine. When they're in quarantine, they attend class virtually. So our faculty are flowing between face-to-face, virtual, and students coming and going in the virtual environment, depending on whether or not they're in quarantine. And then our faculty, if a faculty member is out sick, or if a faculty member is exposed to COVID, they have to also go into quarantine. So the students and the faculty are learning to move fluidly with face-to-face and the virtual in the very same classroom all the time. This bodes well for better business models in the future and will assist the university with making the transitions that it needs to make to survive, thrive, not just survive all the after effects of COVID-19.
Kathaleen, a question. Does this mean that you will not need the physical buildings of a university in the future?
Well, theoretically, you don't need them now. But what we find, this is what I always talk about, is that in a university setting, as in any business, the question is, what is the function of the building? Now, if you're an architect, we talk about function in certain ways, but here I'm talking about what's the real purpose of the building? Can you define that? So is it a social gathering point? Here's a classic example in the university. You know, this is kind of a humorous statement, but true or false, students come to university in order to learn and get the discipline, knowledge in order to be successful in their career. True or false? True, of course. Why else do you come to university? Students come to a Christian university in order to find a spouse. True or false? Oh, well, we don't do that at university. Oh, yes, we do. A key function of 18 to 22-year-old Christians is the opportunity to meet other 18 to 22-year-old Christians. And in that process, many of them will find their lifetime spouse. And so this becomes a critical function that's harder to do via virtual than on the campus. I'm giving a bit of a humorous example here to make my point. You really have to go in and ask, what is the purpose of the buildings? And if they're not serving a purpose that is beneficial toward the vision and mission of your institution, why do you want to keep them in today's technology? It becomes an artificial reason for having it.
Good answer. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, shall we move on? I'm just going to make a couple of quick comments here. Talking about communication, I find it really fascinating to take a look at what was happening in the media at the time in the spring. And one of the things that really worked well for the president of this country was every day he gave a communication, a talk, every single day with an update on COVID. And there were a lot of pundits on the news. They would all say, oh, the president said this. Oh, the president said that. You know what was great? If you didn't get to hear the president, there was a video recording. You could go back and listen to yourself with what was the president's update today. I didn't have to depend on other sources. And what that causes people to feel like is, I got it straight from the source, the one that has the most information. Now, there's a big debates going on about this in the United States. But from a leadership perspective in an organization, when you have that trust with your group and the president comes forward and speaks, it gives a sense of security to the people, a sense of engagement that you've not forgotten them, that you're valuable to them, and they look to that person as a lifeline. So in this case, President Trump would talk about the shortfalls and the lack of preparation for a global pandemic, where we were, what we needed to do. He could communicate essential information, updates from media professionals and citizens, how to work effectively as a good team. We saw a lot of that at work, how to create, track, and analyze data on food supply chains, medical supply chains, and how to create essential standards of operation for testing. He informed the public about all of these things. And this became just a good example of bringing information to the table. And again, that's what we were trying to do with our faculty and with our students. Our president also sent out a number of communiques. He and I would tag team what he was doing with the students, so we did not have any overlap. Too much communication, by the way, is not good either. It's the rhythm and the pattern of the communication that matters. And that gives a sense of continuity and purpose, and I guess security and trust would be the two factors I would say. It's the rhythm and the pattern of your communication that matters, but not too much, not too little, rhythm and pattern.
But Kathaleen, it's also important.
My faculty loved
as to who's saying it. It's also important.
If there's no trust relationship, yes. If there's no trust in the relationship before the crisis, the person who's speaking, maybe there's no relationship or there's low trust relationship. The person speaking will not necessarily increase their ability to communicate and build that trust, to build that security. So a leader has to be very intentional about how their communication will or will not build trust. And again, if you're starting with a deficit in trust, it's almost impossible to overcome. Therefore, a key leader may not be the best person to speak. In the case of Donald Trump, there were some who were negative, but it also reinforced a huge portion of the population to feel more included. The president did not bypass them, and that actually built trust. Yeah. But if you're in an organization, you already have low trust with your employees, you may have to choose a trusted voice to send a message. Be careful, bearer. Right? So just because they're second in command beneath you is not necessarily the person that should be communicating that if they do not have strong trust already. If not, you've got to find a way to build that trust in that person.
Yeah. Good answer.
Yep. Okay. Moving on. I think we've talked a little bit about how it has impacted your leadership, but what I would like to have you think about for a few minutes is, How did COVID impact your core beliefs, your values, your ethics, your leadership style, your actions, and your interactions? Any quick comments? Did any of you find your leadership belief shifting, or which of your values became most important? And what aspect of your leadership style? Want to hear what happened with you guys, not just on my side.
Hi, Dr. Kathaleen. Ying Xiu here. There's a comment on the chat. Let me read to you. It says, human interactions have been severely impacted, where technology can never fully complement nor replace. So adding on to that, I had a thought about leadership. Perhaps previously before COVID, there was that belief that I can communicate in a certain way. And then when the crisis happened, there was a need to communicate in another way. Yeah, so I thought that was more about change management in terms of for a leader versus how I relate to people and how I thought I should be relating to people. So there is that belief that is being challenged. You know, there was always a thought that I held on to say, oh, people prefer to be communicated to in this way. And then when the crisis happened, I found that I had to do it in another way. So change was imminent, both on my own mind as well as perhaps on other people's mind. Yeah.
Yes, and that is absolutely essential. One of the things that I found very important was to have a communication background. Not that I'm a great public information campaign person. I did do a lot of the analysis and the research behind the scenes on that. But I actually pulled in a communication specialist that works with me on a regular basis and would bounce pieces and ideas off of her. But, you know, it came back to the old thing of you cannot take for granted when you change the situation that it will be the same type of communication. We're back again to really defining the audience, how you're going to be able to reach them, what's the strength of the medium, what's the weakness of the medium, how it works, how it doesn't work, and then tailoring the message accordingly. And that was huge. Understanding which messages should go in video, which messages should go in email, which messages should be sent via social media, which messages should be sent via phone call, all during the COVID crisis was extremely important because, again, it sharpened and focused every single communication. I would still love to be in the same room with all of you having this great discussion. And at breakout time, we would stop and we would all have a cup of coffee together and you would tell me about your families. I would learn about some fun customs that are happening in your country. And if I were in Singapore, I'd be begging Mr. Wee to take me to get some durian. And those are all wonderful things that do build relationships. But we've all found during COVID that even with this type of situation that we're in right here, right now, we get to know each other. We adapt. Even what I'm doing now, trying to say, let me hear from you. I'm wanting to build relationship with you. I'm not wanting to just talk at you. I'm wanting to know who you are. What lessons did you learn? How can we learn together? And that builds relationship as well. So it's different, but it opens up a new world that we wouldn't get to have without the technology. And we have to just know which one is best for what purposes at what time.
Thank you.
And I do recommend if you struggle with communication or if you're uncertain about it, find a communication expert. They will make your life a lot easier, even for simple tasks that you may need to carry out in the communication arena. Because everything, you know, we have a saying in the field of communication. Communication is the glue that binds an organization together. And when you're in a crisis, you find that indeed, communication is the most important link. Without it, you do not continue in a crisis. That was one of the reasons I immediately moved into problem solving each morning with my deans. Why did I do that? Number one, yeah, we had problems to solve, But what was the main factor? When I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about this as a leader, here's what I know. If I hear their tone of voice, if I see their face in Zoom, I will understand something about where they are spiritually, emotionally, how tired they are. So they think I'm there with them and they're helping me problem solve, and they're very proud of that, and I'm very proud of them. But what I'm also doing is observing. I'm noting. I'm caring. Some of them I picked up the phone afterwards, said, how are you doing today? What's going on? How's your husband? Is he sick again today? And those things make a world of difference. So again, that communication, those meetings may be, quote, task-oriented, but for us as leaders, they're not task orientation. They're about positioning and understanding where is your team and what's happening with them. Then you can also know how to make adjustments with your team to make certain that they continue to perform and perform well. So we're monitoring that emotional and spiritual EQ of the group, not just their problem-solving ability.
Kathaleen, so am I hearing you saying that personal vulnerability is an essential key to leadership?
Absolutely. Understanding emotional quotient or EQ of your people is essential, in my opinion. Now, in the crisis, I always warn my team when I first bring them together. Everywhere I go, the first thing I do is I begin to identify who will replace me if I get sick or I get hit by a bus. And so within the first 3 to 4 months, I've already started the grooming process for 2 to 3 people that could step in my place if I had to be out tomorrow. The second thing I do is I talk to them about how much I love being a collaborative person and we're going to work together. But you need to understand that in the crisis, I can turn into a drill sergeant. And so I try to show them that side of my temperament, not in a negative way, but if something happens during the regular year, I'll say, okay, I was just in my drill sergeant mode. I apologize if I stepped on any toes, but we had to get that done. Thank you for helping me get there. Well, when the crisis hits, there are times when I had to step into drill sergeant mode. I assume you know what I mean by drill sergeant.
Yes,
the one who's barking the commands. But what they understand about me is that there's 2 things. Usually I explain, clarify, bring them along. We make a decision together. There are times when I cannot have them do that. And those times I have to give a direct order. And sometimes I cannot give an explanation. You know that in leadership. Sometimes you're not able to tell them why you need to cross this bridge, but you just have to cross it. Because I spend so much time letting them be a part of the decision-making process. And then when I do have to say, here's the command, step onto the bridge and just walk across, no questions asked, they do that because they trust me. And when we get to the other side of the bridge and we're further from it, I usually stop a moment and say, thank you so much for coming across that bridge. Now let me explain to you why I needed to do that. I can't share with this part because that's at the upper level, board level, but I can tell you this practical part. And then 6 months later, when I can share the whole story, if I can, then I will tell them the whole story. So over a period of several years, they've learned that they can trust that my command to walk over the bridge was not arbitrary. It was not me just wanting power and control in the moment because power and control make me feel good, but rather it was a way of moving us all across. And that's trust that comes over 6 years of work. So when crisis hit and I would give that type of command, they were with it. Nobody got any personal hurt feelings. We just moved forward.
As a leader, how do you know when to pass the baton on?
I always am passing it as much as possible because that empowers and strengthens all the muscles below me. Are you talking about when it's time for me to say someone should be in my seat, or I'm simply passing? No. Yeah, I always assume every year personally, and my president knows this, I pray every year with whether or not it's time to pass that along. The research would show that we've done in leadership in the past, around the 7-year mark is actually when people begin to run out of creative ideas. It takes a lot to replenish themselves. That's why they need a sabbatical, or they need to stop and turn that leadership over to another.
Yeah. Because so often,
I'm sorry, what?
So often what happens in Christian organisations, people own the leadership and it becomes their ministry, not a ministry of the kingdom. And it's very hard to wrest that leadership.
Right.
which means it's showing the signs of death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are the challenges that we do see, not just in ministry organizations, but parachurch organizations, right? And then also in some of the businesses. And it's very typical of an entrepreneur who will sometimes really struggle with letting go. But those who've built the good team, their businesses are able to keep going, right? So now, I am completely confident that if I cannot be in the office today, I assure you, I have 2 people lined up. One would be my first choice. Second one is my second choice, but both of them would do a great job. If for some reason both of them could not be there, I have 6 other deans who have all been trained in the critical issues, could all step in and run it until they put somebody in my seat. So I prepare from day one in case I do need to step out or can't be there. And then again, I know that rule of thumb is about 7 years. You need to start reflecting. You need to take some time off. You got to revitalize yourself.
Yeah,
but again, it's the team, like you're saying, the team.
Thank you.
It's interesting to watch a couple of newer churches that are starting, and the churches are actually following more of a business model in that they are, one of them in particular that I'm observing and working with right now is putting in place a team from the beginning, and they're making it much less central pastor focused. So the central pastor may or may not be there on a Sunday, and it's okay. They still have the final legal responsibility. They have the final financial responsibility. You know, the buck stops with that person, with that lead pastor. I mean, there's still that certain amount of responsibility that's there. But the truth is that the church could function. What they're trying to build is a situation where the church could function without that person. And in fact, one of those pastors said, it's not my name that I want known. I want the church to be able to move forward with or without me. And some of that has been...
Are we looking at a new model for church, moving from maintenance to mission?
I'm seeing more of that in some of the younger pastors that I'm working with. I'm not working with tons of them, but with the couple that I am, that's clearly what's driving them. That's what they're looking at from a leadership style. They're very dynamic personalities, but their goal is to have in place an organization that no matter what happens in what kind of crisis, it will be able to keep moving forward. Yep. Okay. So feel free to ask me questions as we go, but let's move on. Next slide, please.
So Kathleen, what kind of student intake and revenue, is your unit, is ORU affected because of COVID-19? Because
yes, we had a very interesting phenomenon. In the spring, we were actually able to hang on to most of our students. Like I said, we had our normal dropout rate, if you will. We call that withdrawal from classes. It was our normal rate. It was not excessively high. So we were shocked, but our spring semester did not cost us as much as we thought it would. We obviously had lots of extra expenses in the springtime, making certain that all technology was appropriately established and deployed. And then in the summer, we had to make certain all our classrooms were fully up to speed with the technology. So those were some added expenses. We lost some money in terms of some ancillary things that we do. For instance, our arena, our basketball arena, we often lease that out for events, and we lost all of our revenue on the leasing of that building. We did not lose money on the revenue related to students, student fees, student tuitions. All of that worked well through the spring. Coming into the fall, we did have, as I said, over 200 students who chose to be virtual. That means we had 200 students who were not residential on the campus. So we were down in our revenues regarding our beds. We call them beds and food. Basically, the residential halls, we didn't have as many students. So we see a downturn in the revenue there. But we had an increase in the number of students. And included in that, we saw increase in our growth of online students. That is a lower tuition rate. So across the board, we had a higher head count, but like every institution, we'll be guarding every penny that we have this year to make certain that we're able to accommodate that loss on the number of students who did not come to the residence halls. But we're better off than most. We had prepared for up to 400 and something students not being back on campus. We only had right at 200. So we were very blessed. The other thing that affected us, talking about the virtual students, a number of international students could not get visas to come to the U.S. All the embassies were closed. It was hard to get an appointment. And so we have a number of those virtual students are international students. They'll be with us in January. Or at least we're hoping that the visas will come through in before January. So they'll be arriving, we hope, and that will make up some of the difference in spring semester. So we'll watch everything very carefully for the entire year. We're not going to take anything for granted.
So your university has done very well, but a lot of businesses, they are affected differently. Like our national airlines is in crisis simply because they employ so many people. And they got very qualified people, but they have no choice but to do a retrenchment 6 months later. And that is a pitiful because they've trained up their staff and they're losing a valuable human resource, you know.
Yes.
But other businesses are affected. I think most businesses, their revenue would be reduced now, whether substantially or marginally. So the leadership makes a difference. For instance, in your university, the top management get the biggest cut. The lower management get a slightly smaller cut. And so you lead by example. But in a lot of organizations, they just retrench the people instead of taking, let's say, a 30% cut so that the company can survive. The 30% people can be retained at least on a temporary basis, take a reduction for the next 12 months and see what happened, you know. But everybody can remain intact within the company in terms of family values, in terms of relationship, in terms of loyalty of employees, because the company looks after everyone.
But we do through this year, we do know that we have to constantly look at our organizational structure. And some of those in this new environment means that some of those positions have to change. So we do see that we're going to probably need to, and this is just normal organizational change, right? You need this type of position instead of that. So you either have to redeploy a person and retrain them, or if they don't want that retraining, that position may have to be cut and you may have to put it in another place. But we're not seeing so far that we have any wholesale needing to retrench. Rather, it's going through the year, I'm sure we're going to find ourselves needing to reallocate positions or even remove certain and add others. So that's how we're looking at it, is organizational transition to adapt to a university that is more of a blended learning environment. So we're harnessing this moment towards something that can actually position us well for the future. By the way, an interesting thing that we saw here locally is that a regional department store actually was very concerned about their staff that they had trained and raised up, their management and others. They actually went to Walmart and to Amazon and worked a deal where their employees, especially their lower level employees, were subcontracted to Walmart and to places like Amazon. I think the Amazon deal went through, but I know the Walmart deal did. But anyway, the idea was that the company, the department store organization, actually paid the difference in salary between the employee salary and what Walmart or what Amazon would pay in order to keep their staff available when they could reopen their doors. It was a brilliant solution because the Amazon's, I don't have to tell you, the package delivery business went up big time. Walmart services went up big time. All of that increased in those big box stores like Walmart. And so what they were doing here locally was meeting the needs of those employees so that they were ready to bring back that expertise. And they did that in the summer. Yep. I thought that was an innovative solution.
But in the US, like in Singapore, United Kingdom, the government has got very high subsidy, financial subsidy, to cushion the frozen economy. And that really helps the businesses and the individuals and the families. But in emerging countries like Russia, like India, in the Philippines, they may not have that kind of handout. So the businesses are really badly affected. So it becomes a personal crisis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it does. Yeah. Yes, it does. And my heart bleeds for this nation. I think it was one of the gentlemen, Mr. Wee, that you had from the UK, as he said, the mental health issues that have come out of COVID-19, not only the fear of the disease, but what it's doing to the breakup of the family, the child abuse, the drug and alcohol addictions. I mean, these are so tragic, what we see that's happening. So it's not just the economic loss, it's the economic loss and impact on the family, and then all these tragedies that go along with that. So it's very difficult. Indeed, turbulent times, as we say here, calls for a fresh approach to leadership. It's leadership that has to be nimble, it has to be agile. I want us to just take a moment to look at the definition that I like of leadership, which is the next slide. And this is by Dr. Peter Singhi. He's an American systems scientist who was a senior lecturer at MIT Sloan School of Management. And he was also faculty at the New England Complex Systems Institute. And he's the founder of the Society for Organizational Learning. But I like his definition of leadership. He says, leadership is not about positional power. Yeah, positional power lets you bark the orders, but positional power does not bring trust. It may bring intimidation, it may bring fear, it may bring coercion, and it may bring compliance, but it does not necessarily bring leadership and trust. It's not about accomplishments. As we know in leadership, you can't rest your laurels on what was done yesterday. What matters in the crisis is what we do today. Leadership is about creating a domain in which human beings continually deepen their understanding of reality and become more capable of participating in the unfolding of the world. Ultimately, leadership is about creating new realities. So what this is saying is that in leadership, we create a space in which a person, the people working with us and for us, can understand the context, the reality of what we're dealing with. Now, that does not mean in COVID-19 that I give the faculty every single detail that I have about understanding what can happen when COVID-19 rips through a building and what happens when they get to the hospital, and I drive up their fear. But rather, I give enough information with enough clarity that the faculty understand not just the fact that students might get sick and they might get sick, but together we have to work with the business model. We have to work with new opportunities for how to learn. I bring them into that reality that it's changing, but it's okay. And what I like to say is I give the faculty or that team the guardrails. On this side, you don't want to go too far that way. You don't want to go too far that way. But right here in this space, I make certain that's their sweet spot so that they get the right information and they understand the reality of that particular situation. And in that process, then they become a participant in helping the university unfold this new model for education. So they're not just being told what to do. This is why the training was so important. We put the training in place so that the faculty could get the knowledge and they would be able with that learning then to participate with us to unfold the best practices in teaching in the virtual environment. They became a part of the problem solution. That's huge. Now, what does that mean for the future? As they have helped me solve the problem, if you'll stay on the same slide, please. As they state the previous slide, yeah. As they are working together and they're helping me solve this problem of what are the best practices in virtual learning, what they're doing is unfolding the future. They have themselves helped create a new reality of education. What does that mean? It means that in the future, I'm not pushing rope. It means that they are now the ones that have created the best practice. They have been the participant in this new virtual reality. They are now going to start telling me what is needed, what kind of technology should be improved, what type of new technologies we should bring to the university. They're going to be telling me that they need to be teaching that leadership session. They're going to start writing the articles on how to do this. Now they have created a new reality of a learning institution, of a university. And now we can go forward with the blended learning because they have taken the ownership and created that reality along with us, along with me. That's a very different leadership approach than we're going to do it this way, follow my orders, what's the next step? So I love that they become participants and we create a new reality. Moving forward, the leadership in the next slide talks about the fact that this is transformative and adaptive leadership. And it draws upon the characteristics of both of these styles, of both the adaptive leader and the transformational leader. And in the time that we have left, I want to take a look at that adaptive leader. So I have been looking at, by the way, when I put these two together on that previous slide, I refer to these two things coming together. And I don't know, are most of you familiar with adaptive leadership or transformational leadership? Could you give me a little bit of feedback so I know how much to reference here? Okay.
Well, the description and the words define the style of leadership.
Okay.
Adaptation
right.
and formation.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay.
Yeah, but we want to learn how do you define?
Okay, I just didn't want to, we'll go through each of these then. The adaptive leader on the next slide is leadership that is a practice of mobilizing people to tackle tough challenges and thrive. You'll notice in one of my earlier slides, I talked about what all did we mobilize, if you want to hang on. We mobilized we mobilized the technology. We mobilized you can stay on the same slide we're on. Yeah, right there. We mobilized the technology, we mobilized the faculty, we mobilized the students, I mobilized the deans, the university was mobilized by the health and safety task force, we mobilized. So we were constantly moving forward. And this is the approach that is discussed by Ronald Heifetz in his book, The Practice of Adaptive Leadership, Tools and Tactics for Changing Your Organization and the World. If you've not read the book, it's worth getting a hold of and reviewing. There's some short forms of it, or you can get the long version of it. But it basically asks yourself, what is it that I need to do to be an adaptive leader and help my organization to adapt during difficult times? Well, how are you going to mobilize your team? That becomes the question. Before the COVID-19, Christian higher education, as I mentioned, was already struggling with numerous converging factors, and I referenced this a while ago. There are economic and market forces. The business model in education is not a good one. It's basically dependent on a lot of donations or dependent on state funding, both of which have been decreasing, and trying to find out the tuition value. As you all know, around the world, everybody's saying students are paying too much for higher education. They should not be paying that much. Well, economic and market forces are at work trying to fold and stop the old model of education. In fact, I do a lecture that says from the Middle Ages to the present, what's happened with the universities. And the bottom line is the economic model has changed. There's three basic economic models. It's been a shift and a change. And now we're in the throes of another business model change. It's a crashing industry. It's having a hard time surviving and finding its way. It will, because it's a learning organization, but it's just a difficult, painful process. It reminds me of when in the 80s, the steel industry crashed in the United States, followed by the textile industry and the furniture industry. Very hard market forces at work. It's a very bureaucratic system. In every country I've been in, including the United States, bureaucracy is the name of the game when it comes to education, and you have to understand each of those levels. Obviously, it's so tightly controlled because as your educational system goes, so goes your nation, right? So it's a very difficult process. It's a very unwieldy process, very cumbersome process. It does not allow a lot of room for innovation and change. Education could have changed 20 years ago, dramatically changed and reduced cost, but the bureaucratic forces do not allow that. So you have market forces combating bureaucratic systems. The changing will of society. In the United States, there's a big push right now saying higher education is not needed. You're better off to be like one of the big guys, that Zuckerberg, who never finished college, or one of the others. Look how much money they've made, and they never got that degree. So why bother? Why do that? Words like, it costs so much money, it's not worth it. What they don't realize is that while you may come out of there owing 2 years or 3 years of your annual income, the truth is that that's kind of the way it's always been. When I graduated back in the dark ages, I owed 2 or 3 years of salary. It's just the way it was, but it has certainly paid off for me. I'm so glad I did it. Financially, it was the best decision I ever made, the best investment I ever made. But still, there's a changing will of the society that says education is not that, higher education is not that important. Rather, specialized training is what's important. Demographics, we see a shift in the 18 to 22-year-old in this country. We actually had a decline in that population. But we also are seeing a shift in terms of the diversity in our classrooms. So managing the diversity takes more energy and more resources. Technology costs are increasing. How is technology impacting us? That's huge. I don't have to go into all the details of that. Then we had lots of government policies, educational policies that were changing. And in the United States, some of those educational policies have been a direct hit on the Christian universities and impact us. One of the greatest threats that we have and we're constantly guarding is that educational institutions, Christian institutions, have the right to hire people who share the common values of our Christian university. And that's under direct attack, or has been in the past, and continues to be an ongoing concern that we can hire faculty who share our lifestyle beliefs. And of course, our accreditation agencies, we have to constantly monitor. So the crisis does not happen in a vacuum. Rather, it happens in the pea soup of difficulties that an organization is already affecting or already has. So with the COVID-19, then, were new challenges. We had to decide whether to permit students to return to campus. We had to mobilize classroom instructors. We had to help students make the leap from the classroom learning to remote learning, body, mind, and spirit. Remember, we believe in body, mind, and spirit. So they still had to get their exercise. How were they going to do that? Confined to a quarantined environment at home. But we thought it was important. So we worked on alternative ways of getting and staying physically fit during COVID-19. Then we had to interact, as I mentioned before, with the local and state agencies. A lot of work involved, and we had to mobilize. What we had to do was be adaptive in a highly changeable environment, and our commitment to continue to seek transformation at the highest level possible, even in the midst of disruption. So let's look at the adaptive eagle. We chose the eagle, I love this, as a representation of the adaptive leader, because the eagle, during a storm, while most birds take shelter, the eagle flies directly into the storm. Next, the eagle is adaptive in that the eagle will lock its wings into position and fly headfirst into the raging winds to rise above the storm. Eagles have incredible vision and can focus on the point or the prey up to 5 kilometers away. And finally, eagles fly high and often alone, because it is in their God-given identity to do so. And we all know that when training an eaglet, the mother will make the nest uncomfortable and then will push the eaglet out of the nest, forcing it to learn to fly. And what I see for us as Christian leaders, God has given us, through the power of his Holy Spirit, the ability to rise up during the storm. If we will keep focused on him and take our shelter in the Most High. I love that image of being beneath the wing, right? But if we will take the shelter underneath the Most High, if we'll fly directly into the storm, knowing that we're sheltered by him, if we will lock ourselves into position, that we will set our face like a flint to serve God, no matter how difficult it may be, no matter how much we may be tempted to compromise on our values or the situation, if we will lock ourselves into position to set our face before the Lord and say, God, we're trusting you with our organization. We're trusting you with where it has to change. We're trusting you with whether it has to fold or reopen. How does it reopen? What does it look like? There is no way out of this, but I am dependent on God. I'm setting my face like a flint. Even if everything falls down around me, I will trust the Lord my God. Then what we're able to do, even though it's a hard place, we can trust that he will give us the vision to see what is not in the immediate moment, but what is 5 kilometers away, what is out on the horizon. Where can we head? Where can we go? Well, we're going where he points our vision. And when he gives us that vision, we do not look to the right. We do not look to the left, but we begin to shape and adjust our organization and our leadership toward that vision, toward what he's calling us to. So when we fly high, we are not alone, but because of that, God is with us. We fly high and we fly with God. We may not have our team with us. Our business may even be gone, but it's that God-given person, that person who has God in the center. He lets us continue to fly high. And when we are taking the organization through these hard places, I don't have to tell you this. I am certain that the president of the university spent many a night alone with God, just as I did at my level, many a time in prayer. Lord, give me wisdom, give me understanding, give me guidance. Let me walk in your path. You show me what to do, because this is unknown territory. No one's been there before. Yes, I garner all my knowledge from the past, whether it's from the FY, 2000, when we were all worried about what was going to happen with YouTube, with that point, or whether it was today with COVID-19. Often those hours are alone, bringing together what we know, but under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. And then as leaders, we have to be willing for God to kick us out of our comfortable nest of how we have been leading into the new nest that he's preparing for us in the midst of the crisis. That's the adaptation. It hurts, it prickles, it's frightening. And with a crisis, we're just thrown out of that nest, and we're trusting that God really does know it's time and that we're prepared. So when we look at this as an adaptive leader filled with the presence of the Holy Spirit, we have to see that God is shaping us, molding us, and driving us into the next place where he's called us. This is the exciting work of God. And when we understand it as the exciting work of God, all of a sudden, what is a negative becomes, I am working with the kingdom of God to advance what God wants. It's not what I'm thinking. It's what he is going to show me in the midst of the crisis. And I believe that in this particular crisis, he's calling us as Christian leaders to know that we are building his kingdom, not our own, and to know that we are to be dependent on him, for he is the true provider. I get afraid. Last year, we didn't know if the whole university was going to fall. Are we going to have any income? Will we be able to keep going? everyone had this question at the upper level of leadership. We may not have discussed it a lot out loud because we were walking in faith, but everyone inside knew if God didn't help us, we wouldn't find the way through. And in the midst of that, we had to keep our eye on what is God carving, what is God doing, and trust that it will be good. Not trust the systems of the world, because we didn't know if students would come or not come, but we could trust our God and he would provide. So let's just stop a moment and let me have your feedback in the little bit of time that we have left. Here's some questions that you can ask yourself. Which of the adaptive leader characteristics to the right resonates with you? Which of these characteristics would you like to see yourself develop further? Anyone have any feedback? Okay. I don't see all your names, so I can't call on anyone. If I were in a classroom, I would call on somebody's name and ask them to respond. But I would be really interested in what you've seen, what you're hearing.
I think there's an awareness of the need to equip and prepare upcoming leaders. It seems to me that many of our ordained clergy go through their seminaries learning all the theology and all the traditions and rituals of the church, but very little leadership training. So when they get into a parish, they lack an essential quality to lead their congregation to a mature Christian life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about some of you? Have you found yourself, that's a good comment, thank you. What about some of you? Did you find yourself having to shift your focus or your vision? What about some of the other companies or businesses, maybe not even your own? What crisis did you see for the leader? Not just in terms of maybe reinventing their core product, but what about their sense of identity? What about their values? What did you see happening there? Okay. Well, let's finish up this session then on the last comments about the adaptive leader, and we'll pick up with, I'm sorry, someone had a comment?
Dr. Kathaleen, maybe you give them time to digest and ask the right questions.
Okay.
So what would the response of the leader be in this crisis? In whatever position you're in, what is your response in terms of the promises of God, in terms of your leadership courage and your leadership confidence? You know, your confidence can be shaken. Yes, yes, Mr. Samir.
Since you've asked me, I said, I think, you know, for us, yeah, by the way, good evening, everybody in Singapore and everybody here in the States, good morning. For us, I think of, you know, when Jesus was in the storm and he told all of his disciples to chill out and relax, everything's going to be all right. I think for us, you know, that was one of the things I looked at for a leader. And what I tried to do for our team is that, you know, you can only, you know, focus on what you can control. We couldn't control, you know, the larger scale of the pandemic. So we had to look internally at our businesses and what we could control. And that helped us kind of micro focus what we could do. And so internally for my company, we brought on a business coach. We used the downtime of the quarantine and lockdown to really work on things that we hadn't worked on before. And that helped us really grow as a company. And then one of our projects is a hotel in San Antonio, Texas. And, you know, travel around the world just stopped and has still, you know, been a bit of a struggle. What we did at that time was go in and meet with all of the employees at the hotel and really kind of chatted with them about if we work together, we can survive this storm. And we didn't lay anybody off, and everybody's still there. And the hotel, where there's right now a 65% default rate on hotels in America, thankfully we are still, thriving and growing. And I think it was because we all took a little bit of a step back in, fees, and kind of shared the responsibility from top to bottom. And I think that's where adaptive leadership really came in. And there was just one last thing that I personally learned through this period. I think Kathaleen had mentioned earlier about different leadership attributes. And one that we don't talk about a lot, and I used to kind of maybe smirk at it, was empathy. And, with mental health and everybody being at home and struggling, it was something that I had to learn, and I think really helped us to grow and survive. The concept of empathy and leadership. So I go back to, again, Jesus being in the eye of the storm, and everything's going bad, and he's just calm. And so if we take that, I think we get through these periods as true believers and successful leaders.
Good comments.
Any other question on how to be adaptive or how to survive a storm?
Really love to hear some of those experiences. I tried to give mine not to dominate, but to be a reference point and say we were vulnerable and we survived it, but it was hard work.
Yeah. I think the organizations or the individuals who are better prepared will do better in a storm. Mm-hmm. So, we cannot be overconfident, but if we have enough reserve, the organization will be more confident. But when you don't have enough reserve and you're on the edge every month, so your cash flow will be jammed up. So a lot of businesses folded up within 3 months because there's just not enough time for them to make the adjustment. No matter what subsidy you get, straight away you react and then you start firing your employees. But in any business, if you have time, if you're in the initial building up stage, then you don't have time to prepare your reserves. So, but everyone live by faith in God. When you have business, you pray. The Lord does give warning. He does speak to us. So if we pray and He tells you this is going to be a difficult year, then you got to open up your ear and say, who is that speaking? This is going to be a difficult year, because usually He prepares you for it, right? And so our faith and dependency is on God. And so in a crisis, the leaders got to be courageous. You got to live by faith, and you got to trust God that He will pull you through. But if you are better prepared, then you'll be more confident. You have more options. You're better prepared. But you're not well prepared. Actually, your business can fold up, and you have no choice but to close it up. And so it depends on the stage of the development of your business. If you're a new business, usually you don't have not enough time to have reserves. You're still building up and you're still investing in. I think the key thing is to pray and to be led by the Lord now. And no crisis is too difficult to be overcome. And crises happen. But there's one verse in 1 Corinthians 10:13. There's no temptation that's taken you but God is faithful, right? Every one of us go through the crisis, but God is faithful. He will give you a way to escape the crisis that you face. Maybe some of you may have different experience,
What was it like in some of the other countries? Or what would you wish that maybe some people that you've worked with or around, what would you wish they had known or understood? And what are the testimonies of how God prevailed and helped? Right. Well, I can move on forward, but this is a good breaking point, Mr. Wee. I think our time is approaching the end here.
Okay. Any other comment from any person? Any other comment before we close up for tonight? I think Dr. Kathaleen has given a good case study what the university went through. Obviously, the university must be well prepared, develop a good culture of affinity to the university. The students are loyal to the university. They continue their studies. The faculties, is completely ready for the challenges. I mean, the team leadership. So everything is, the crisis become a smaller crisis if you're better prepared. But if you're not well prepared, and if the morale is no good among, whether the faculty or the students or in a company, the business, where the morale of the company is not really that good, when you go through a crisis, it would be a rough ride. You will lose a lot of good people, and people lose confidence in the organization. But if the organization is tight and is well run, I think you minimize the problems that you face in the crisis. And this crisis is a disruption. It affects different businesses differently. And so some businesses are less affected. For Mr. Zamir, he's an entrepreneur, he's adaptable. So, he overcomes, he thrives in a crisis. Okay, some individuals do thrive in a crisis. Okay, the crisis is also an opportunity. It's also an opportunity, but you have to size up the situation and move forward. So we have to be adaptive leaders, and then we got to be transformative. Okay, so maybe next week we'll cover transformation of businesses after a crisis. Okay, any other question?
Yeah, we will.
Any other comment? Luis, any comment, Luis? Luis, go. Or Jason?
Yeah. Oh, yes, Senior Elder Wee. Well, I just would like to share my observation about a very good church, which is City Missions. The reason why I say that is that during this crisis, I noticed that our church has come up so quickly, more than a church. In fact, it has become like a Bible college, a seminary. We have the kingdom leadership. We have the Saturday training. So the church actually has risen much more than just a church equipping leaders of the nation. So my observation is that our church, City Missions, is really very excellent in this particular area. So I'm just very impressed, Senior Elder Wee.
I would like to add my comment to that too, as a person who enjoys the church there very much. You've given me the opportunity to be a participant. I can't be as much as I would like, but it has really been wonderful to share in the church. So I love the way it's expanded, City Mission.
Yeah,
yes.
We're actually reaching out to more people, having programs which are more impactful. Jason Hendroff, we want you to comment or to share your business experience. You've been achieving.
Okay, all right, Dr. Kathaleen, I enjoyed very much the feedback and the comments that you have given, especially, in fact, I was talking to my daughter just now and we were just talking about sending, she's very young, but she was suddenly decided that she wanted to study in the US, so maybe next time she may get another student at your university. But anyway, in terms of the adaptive leadership, I mean, in the secular world, I think it's quite easy. Like, for example, the company that I work for, we are a construction company, and especially in the areas where construction and development and investments had really dried up, and actually we had to be transformative into understand what kind of new kinds of buildings. You indicated just now that maybe the function of a university, the physical building may not be so important anymore. And I tend to agree to that. And therefore, we actually decided to use the technology that we have in order to go into something which is more productive, especially with the deglobalization that's happening. For example, we are going into food security in parts of Indonesia where we are doing high yielding tomatoes and things like that, you know. But coming back to the church, I mean, I'm listening to a lot of sermons and other churches. They are always preaching in terms of being hopeful. But how do you ensure that the church itself are able to be transformative itself to be something like a secular business where they are not only to be hopeful, where testimonies are normally now history, but they can actually adapt themselves to be somewhat more secular, to be adaptive and be more transformative towards the congregation. So those are some questions which is actually part of what I'm thinking of. So would you like to share a little bit? What's your thoughts about it?
I would love to hear, Mr. Wee, as you've worked so much with Marketplace Ministries, what you're seeing with that. Again, working primarily in the university context, I am working with a couple of smaller churches that are in startup phase, but I would like to hear a little bit more seasoned pastor who's working with this on a regular basis.
Yep. Well, I guess business got adaptive, and you can be reactive, you can be adaptive. All right. If you're better prepared for a storm, you will handle the storm better. But if you're not ready for a storm and you're at a different stage of your business build up where you don't have enough reserve, I think it's going to be quite challenging. But if you have reserve in either as an individual or as a business, and your business is not too overweighted, and you're not highly leveraged, you'll be able to walk through the storm. Every crisis is a beginning and an end. The crisis, World War I came and it ended in 1918. Then World War II ended in 1945. Every crisis has beginning and end. This pandemic may end off, I think, maybe by the end of the year or the first quarter of next year. I don't think it will last longer than that. So we have to be adaptive and walk by faith. So the businesses that are prepared, I think, will do well. But certain businesses may not survive because of the nature of the business. If you're in the tourism, the travel business, I think you will be quite frozen. But if you have enough reserve, you can still survive. So I think the cushion is very important for the business.
Yep. And on the ministry church side, while it's difficult for a church to go through these things, and many have adapted with streaming online, those types of things. But I think the most important thing that's happened for the churches in the United States has been that it's forcing them to really sift and determine what is it that we are really doing. What is it that is essential? There's the question of if churches are not on the essential list and they're shut down, were they essential or were they not? The challenge becomes for the church to really evaluate what is it that we do that without in the communities just do not thrive. They don't do well. So I think that, we see what the Mission Church did here with pivoting basically to becoming a learning institution. And I would like to recast that, not just as educational per se, but as discipling. And one of the number one things that I'm seeing in the United States across the U.S. is while there's lots of good teaching and training going on, there's also a lot of churches that are not making certain that the average church member is adequately discipled. And this is huge. And I have not seen a lot of the churches here responding by creating such great learning opportunities as is being offered by, say, Mission Church at this time. So this, to me, is a time when the churches really need to ask that question of not just what's the function of my building, which is huge. They need to answer that question. But they also need to ask, what's the function of the church? And how do we reinvent some of those things that we are doing in this new environment? But what is it that we stopped doing that we should be doing? Or what do we need to enhance? And then the other critical issue that goes into what's the true values of the church. And what's the temperament of the church? What's the character of the local church? Because we all have the question of what is the role of church? What is the role of state? And what is the balance between those two? And in the United States, while a few of the churches have risen to the occasion and they've said, no, we've got to clarify that the church has the responsibility to be in charge of the church and not to be controlled by the state. This debate has to continue. It must exist. I was on a conference call a month or two ago, not a conference call, but it was another situation where I was speaking with some policymakers. And one of the policymakers was dealing with, in that particular unit, globally, but a special emphasis upon the European Union. And he said that in his work, in his legal work, he's a lawyer and he's with a think tank. But he said that they're finding from across the globe, the number one issue of COVID-19 was the issue of church versus state, or religion versus state. No matter what your religion, this was the challenge. And there was a clear move in the public policy across the globe to decrease the importance of the religious institutions. Again, here, it was a secular meeting, so he was talking about all forms of religion, not just Christianity. But this is a core issue for the church across the board. So back to the practical aspects of that, teaching, training, and developing the church to be true disciples is one of the number one things that we have to do, because we've got to raise up the people who are able to enter the political debate, to enter the arenas of business, and to have a clear understanding from a Christ-centered perspective. I'm sorry that was a long answer, but it's something very near and dear to my heart, and I'm very passionate about.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kathaleen, for your answer, and thank you for teaching us tonight. Thank you to all the participants for your participation. Let's close with a word of prayer. Father, we thank you for this Kingdom Leadership Program by Dr. Kathaleen. We thank you for her generous sharing, her clear sharing. We pray that everyone will learn the principles that are being taught here tonight and apply them in their life. We pray for that you will protect every family in the church. You protect every family in this Zoom, and that you will be the protector. You will be the shield. You guide and lead them by the power of your Spirit. That the just shall live by faith, and that our dependency upon you will be something trustworthy. And because even as we put our trust in you, you will lead us all the way, to success and to be victorious. Father, we ask that you bless everyone, even as we dismiss. And thank you to our lecturer this evening. In Jesus' wonderful and glorious name, amen.